Hi Dave, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate.
Good.
What are we going to have to eat today?
Well,
I'm pretty starving, I am. I've had no breakfast this morning.
I've started off, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm just frying some meat out. So this is really easy to remember ingredients. 400 grams of lean minced pork, 500 grams of stir-fried vegetables. I've also got some soy sauce and some flour, just mixed up, corn flour, sorry, to thicken it up later, which I've pre-mixed. Garlic and ginger, and some sweet chili sauce. That's all it is. Really simple ingredients, really cheap, and I'll use sesame seed oil to do it. You can use alternatives. People are allergic to that.
Not this toasted sesame seed oil.
Toasted seed, yeah. There you go. So we're just blending it off, because these takes about 5-10 minutes just to blend off. So we started the process straight away, and that's where we are. So that's what
I'm looking forward to that.
My new knife, which is absolutely fantastic.
Is this the knife you nearly cut your finger off?
It is. Yeah, correct. It is very sharp. But I have to say, oh, what a great knife! Chop all of the vegetables up. Sharp, but very careful. But yeah, Amazon Ken home knife, not expensive, but fantastic.
Good. No, it's always good to have a good knife, and I mean, it always amazes me, these chefs. You see them all going and chopping things up and making such a beautiful job of it. And, but yeah, no, good on them.
Good.
So, in terms of having a chat today about some of the crimes and that, I know we spoke a lot about like murders and really horrific crimes, and I'm not saying that this one isn't horrific in its own way, but it's slightly different.
Garlic and ginger. Yeah,
this is more like an armed robbery type case. We touched on it earlier on today, so it'll be interesting to see how that come about and what the conclusions were.
Yeah, so people locally around Worcester and Worcestershire will remember a farm shop called Holloway's. It was out at Rushwick, and it's still there in existence today actually, but not under that name. George Holloway, what a lovely man. His family is still local. In fact, his son's got a business out at Sutley. But anyway, George was a character. There's no doubt about it. You can't hide it. He was a lovely man, but he was a character, and he ran a farm shop. So he was a grower, and he had pickers, and people would do it, and he sold the shop. But he obviously had great skills to manage people and deal with that sort of that world. Anyway, one day back in about 1992, George was the victim, the subject of an armed robbery. So he's in his home, in his bungalow, which is just across the road from the farm shop, and three men come in, knock at the door, bundle their way in, sawn off shotgun, seriously assault George, tie him up, because they think there's lots of money there. And do you know what? He's a big old boy, George was. He liked his rugby, he liked his golf. I actually personally think of being one of them, they wouldn't have took a chance. He'd have took him. Probably two of them, George would have come. Even in his age, he was his mid to late 60s. But with three of them, he had no chance, especially with a sawn-off shotgun pointed in your face. It's not the nicest thing. And he really got badly assaulted. And if you look back in there, if you want to Google it, you'll see that they showed him his picture on the front of the Worcester News, and it was horrendous, really. Anyway, so we got involved, and the inquiry began. Just before I forget, they're going to put some noodles in this, so I drain the noodles, put in some hot water, just for about 5-10 minutes, and we'll put them in there first. That's just sort of the process you should do now.
And are those like pre-cooked noodles, or are those?
You can get both. You can get the pre-cooked ones, or you can get the dry ones and just put them. It's in boiling water. Stick them in there for 5-10 minutes or something. So either or, really.
And what have we got today?
We've got some pre-cooked ones. Yeah. So they're there. Yeah. So they're there. Right. Here we go. We're going to put the veg in now. As I say, about 400 grams of veg, 400 grams of pork mince, lovely. Cook it all through.
So going back to George, why do you think he was targeted? Because obviously in those days, I'm guessing there was
I would imagine that
perceived cash around. I suspect.
That's right. It was a lot of cash work those days. They guessed that he'd have, or they thought he'd have loads of thousands of pounds there, but he didn't. He had, just a few quid there, but they obviously got their, they put two and two together and they thought even more.
Yeah.
So that's what we get. He's tied up, horrendous attack on George, badly assaulted, and eventually makes himself free and gets away and report and calls the cops, and off we go, and we started to deal with it. And we were unfortunate. We got some good information about who was possibly involved in it, and I remember I was a DC at the time. My DS was a bloke called Dave Bartlett, great DS, became my DI, and then we DI together. But my first DI was a bloke called Dave Gower. Again, what great detective, great detective. We called him Growler because his growl was worse than his bite, so he said. But he never a better person you want to work for. Really, he was yeah. Go back to the bill. Had people know the bill. That first D on the bill, you probably if you like that person.
Burnside done the bill.
Burnside, Burnside, that's exactly right.
I did used to watch. He was a character that stuck in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And anyway, so we identified who were the offenders, and I'm going to put a bit more soy sauce in now. Just a few tablespoons, just give a bit more flavour.
What I found with soy sauce is it's surprising how little you actually do need of it to make the flavour. Yeah. It is much stronger than I first appreciated.
I used the light one there and the low salt one. I mean, it's your preference, it's entirely to you, but so anyway, we went at whatever day it was of the week, 3 teams. We've identified who it possibly was, our offenders, suspects. Now we go and we all go and arrest certain ones. And this is a great story, Dave. So Growler, the DI, and a great DC, bless him, he's dead now, Jerry Bradley, part of their team went out to arrest one of the suspects and arrest him, bring him all back in, book him back into custody. Then the teams went back out to speak to the respective partners, girlfriends, wives of our suspects.
Yeah.
To basically, to see what information they could give. And so Growler and Jerry Bradley go to speak to the wife of this one particular person, and they're speaking. She's very upset because her husband has been arrested, and there's kids going round, and you can imagine the scene. It's pretty emotive. She got a couple of dogs, but they're outside running around the garden, and she got a couple of snotty kids running around and this. But also in the house she's got a budgie which is flying loose. And now Jerry, bless him, he told this story far better than I could. Just going to turn this down a bit. He did tell a good story, especially at the time. So the budgie is flying about. They're trying to talk to this. Try and get some information from her, really. And the budgie's flying around, it's landing on the DI's shoulder, and he's pushing it off, and it's God knows what. You can imagine the scene. And eventually they really haven't gained much from her, and they come out the house, and she's in the, you just picture the scene now, so she's in the doorway, at the front door, they're now stood outside, and you've got a hallway and into the lounge. And then the budgie, they see, Jerry says he sees the budgie fly at the lounge and land on the hallway floor behind her, unbeknown to her. All of a sudden, the spaniel comes through, straight in, grabs the budgie in his mouth. One of her kids, some snotty-nosed 5-year-old, is yanking on his mom's dress, going, the effing dog's got the budgie, Mom. And then she picks up the dog, and the dog's still got the budgie in its mouth. Well, you can imagine. I mean, not very nice to the budgie. I get that, but the story was Funny. Anyway, there were lots of more things that happened with that episode, but we eventually gained the evidence, and we charged all three of them with robbery with firearms. Just to say, there's no actually offence of armed robbery. There's an offence of robbery, and then the robbery can be aggravated by having a firearm. So there's no actually offence of armed robbery. It's just robbery.
Right.
Yeah. So people say armed robbery, but it's robbery with firearms or whatever it may be. But there's actually no specific offence of armed robbery.
Yeah.
I mean, the press always say armed robbery, so they got charged, and in the end, the one pleaded guilty. He got 8 years, and the other two got 11 years each. But also, there was still an outside. We never found the firearm, which is.
And did you actually prove that there was a firearm?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you proved there was a firearm.
Well, you never. It was imitation. It's a firearm or imitation firearm, because we didn't ever have the firearm.
Yes.
The very fact that George would give evidence to say there was a firearm, we didn't know if it's real or not. It matters not in the actual scope of things, because it could be real or not real. The very fact is there, but we did have some information that the firearm had been.
But just on that, did you have to prove that was there, or did you just go on what he said? Yeah,
you have to go on the fact that what the victim said was there, and of course they're denying committing the offence anyway.
Yeah.
So clearly,
because I don't know, but to me, like when somebody mentions there's a robbery is robbery, but if there's a firearm involved, it takes, for me anyway, it takes it to a whole new level.
Well, it does. It aggravates the offence of robbery. Yeah. So you've got robbery with a firearm. So you know, hence why people say it's armed robbery, but there's no actual specific offence of that. It's a description really. But it's sweet chili sauce, nice bit of flavour to it.
But no, I just think it's interesting that you can take what's the right word, victim's statement to say that there was a firearm involved, but actually it wasn't there. And we never found it, but what we did have some intelligence about was that the firearm had been deposited and left in the canal. Yeah. In a state where it could be used again, and I know there was some years gone after that there was some actual threats against me and some of the other officers about they're going to come back and get the firearm and use it against us. You know? So that was we never found it, and that's worrying. In fact, there was a firearm slated, out there, but that's the way it is, I'm afraid. We never found it properly, but they got really rightly convicted, Worcester Crown Court, and got good sentences really, because it was a horrendous offence. But and then George, bless him, he died in the early 2000s, I think I might be wrong, but around 2004-05, because we went to the funeral. Me and a bloke called Dave Bartlett, who was the DS, then the DI. We went to his funeral, and he was a very, very liked man, a lovely man, and to be put through that type of horrendous assault, and to imagine you open your front door and 3 people burst in with a sawn-off shotgun, which they clearly did have. I mean, there's no reason they did have a sawn-off shotgun. Tied up, badly assaulted. It's a credit to the man really, because he really coped with it quite well. But I'm sure that as a victim of crime, you would probably go to bed every night going, every time there's a knock on the door, is that going to be the same thing again? Well, it's got it would scare the life out of you, wouldn't it?
Oh, horrendous.
Actually, that what you just mentioned there about the firearm and all that went missing was potentially put by a river or somewhere, or canal or something, and hidden. It was some other questions that I've got for you, not necessarily linked directly to this, but with these
just put the noodles in now.
With cold really cases.
Sorry, go on, mate.
That happen. Obviously, what they're doing now is going back many, many years and looking back at some cold cases. When you were in there, because what they must have, in going way back when, had a process in place for preserving evidence. So you get to a case, you can't resolve it at the time, but you know that there is potentially in the future going to be some evidence on whatever you've gathered there, you know, in terms of like whether it be clothing, shoes, or whatever it might be, guns, shouldn't. But you, at this moment in time, you haven't got the technology to be able to unravel that. What was the process in your day for preserving that evidence?
But I think I think there was a bit more luck than judgment there, to be honest, because what would happen is the evidence would be as preserved as best you can, not realise, you wouldn't necessarily have that foresight going, oh, it's going to get better. I think maybe we do now, especially with DNA evidence, you might think it's going to get better and better and better. I think it's just by a bit of good fortune that you'd have your investigation, you'd have your exhibits, you'd have all those things, and you just keep them, and they'd be locked away, and you got a result you didn't, or it just kept, and luckily, by hook or by crook, that stuff's still about, and then the new processes have been able to help with those unsolved cases. So a bit of good more.
I'm going to sound like a right know-it-all here, but it's only because I've been watching the telly. There's a thing called, I think it's called chain of custody of the evidence. And like it's like, so you to basically have a piece of evidence and then check it later on and find that there is incriminating stuff on there. You have to prove all of the steps that's been protected and stuff like that. And some of the cold cases are going back like 40, 50, 60 years, where they're getting out some of these old things. So somebody somewhere must have had some great foresight to have preserved all of that and sort of believing that in future years there would be a greater technology.
Well, I think, there's a bit of...
Which I think is great, by the way.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of, as I say, good fortune. I think it's the very fact that they've been preserved and kept. It then allows the opportunity to, when the new processes have come through, but you still have to prove that continuity of evidence. So,
well, yeah.
Yes. So, I'm sure that...
And how do you prove that if there was no process in place?
You've got to prove, I suppose, that nobody else has interfered with what you've preserved in the first place. So, the providence of that evidence is there. So 1990, there was this case. All the exhibits. What happened to those exhibits since then? Who's had them? Who's done what with them? You're now talking 2023. So 20, 40, 33 years later, whatever it may be. Are they evident? Is it still the providence of those? Is somebody else has had it? Have
touched it and done that?
Yeah, that's right.
Has there been any capability of that?
So that's the problem.
And how long do the police keep these things for? Is it forever?
Sometimes I think through again, you have an investigation, and stuff gets put to one side, and then it just gets left, and then.
But then there's obviously proper secure storages for these
things
kept in them. But when you think of all of the crimes that happen,
yes, that's right.
Be a bloody big place.
Oh yes, that's right. and that's another issue as well about storage and where it goes, and again that providence, because people move on, they retire, people change, and a job from 20 years ago people haven't got a clue about it because they're only so there is. It's all about proving that providence, and I think lessons are learned about preserving and securing evidence, and that's what it's all about, and showing that and techniques, which is really fantastic. Really, I mean, that you see every day on the news that somebody's been convicted of a rape or a murder or a horrendous offence because of the forensic techniques has got better and better and better. Yeah. And I was very much at the my investigations were very much at the forefront of DNA evidence. It's back in the early 90s. It's been there, got better and better and better. It did, and we will talk about some clear sort of sexual offences and the DNA evidence that have helped to prove. Or disprove.
It can work in for you, but so I mean, did you have any cases over your time? You must have done, I guess, where basically you couldn't prove the guilt.
Oh yeah,
and you've had to revisit it later on. And have you ever had one where you've had to at the time you sort of had a good indication who it may have been, but you couldn't prove it, so you've had to let it go and then revisit it? Or I
think probably now. Yeah, there have been cases that I dealt with originally that we couldn't, and now have come to full bear now that because the forensic opportunities are better, and they've now been reinvestigated, and the evidence is there. And which is
And
really good.
sorry for bombarding you with the questions, but who decides what gets reinvestigated as a cold case and what doesn't?
Well, that's a good point. You've got cold case reviews all the time, so they're trying to, especially around major crime, you're trying to go back over that. Is there anything we can do now? And it gets sort of flagged up to say, well, this murder from 30, 40 years ago, we had nowhere now, but now we've got these better techniques. Have we got any specific forensic evidence we could look at? Has it been preserved? Has it been, because back in the day, there wouldn't have been a perception 40, 50 years ago of DNA evidence. So is it by chance sometimes that you've retained clothing, you've retained this, and so we've got the forensic opportunities to go back and have another look? And, forensic now is...
Well, it's just getting better and better and better by the day, isn't
absolutely,
it? And they can,
it's
they can find stuff now that they couldn't find when DNA was first.
I nearly forgot to put in
What's that?
my corn flour and
A bit of thickener.
and the soy sauce. You'll just coat the noodles nicely, and you'll taste it in a minute, and you'll see what I mean.
Very good. Yeah, because I do find those the cold cases and that really interesting, and also really pleased that they don't just get pushed to one side and not looked at. I think that's
the thing is as well is
really important.
Let's say there's a crime where DNA evidence has been gained, whatever it may be, some blood, saliva, whatever it may be. So there's a DNA match. DNA evidential point got. It's there on the database. It's there. So the first thing that will happen is that there'll be an attempt to match whatever that DNA is with a person who's on the database. Now the fact is that the offender may not be on the DNA database because they had never come to the attention of never their DNA taken. But what has happened on a number of occasions is that years have gone on and on, and then that offender has come onto the database for whatever reason. The classic example is drink driving. So they take the database, they take the DNA off them, and all of a sudden it matches to a historic case. Which is like fantastic.
So every time something happens like that, there is like an automatic run of the database or something.
Well, it itself does it. It's there already, so it'll match it. Isn't it? So brilliant. Yeah. So so some offenders have fortunately been captured because they've got done for drink driving or shoplifting or even anything. And sometimes when you've got a crime committed, and they ask the people, will you come and give your DNA to eliminate you or everything? And occasionally you get some people, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. It's their choice. Yeah. But that does add a bit of suspicion to it as well.
I can imagine that,
So, it's, the DNA is brilliant. I mean, it's been a...
What do you do about that? I mean, you may not know what they do these days, actually, but you get that. You go and do a mass DNA test and think something's happened, and then like Fred, Bill, Harry, or Jane, or whatever, they just decline to do it. There is an automatic suspicion. There would be with me anyway. And what do you do then? Do you keep an eye on that? So because you can't actually do anything about that. You can't force people to do it.
No, you can't. But obviously, you're right. I mean, if somebody just says they don't want to do it, obviously there will be some inquiries to say why you don't want to do it, and
that looks good, pal. Thank you.
It could be a quite legitimate reason why somebody doesn't want it, and I understand that.
What would be a legitimate reason?
Well, I don't know. You just think human rights. You don't want, it's nothing you shouldn't,
Human rights. Yeah. Well, it's an easy one to claim that, isn't it? It
is, but I mean, you've got to give. Some people don't want to give their DNA. They might be scared. They might be scared of the criminal justice system, anything really. But when you start telling them it's actually there to help improve justice, But what's it like, all right?
Beautiful, mate. Yeah, no, just a job.
That is good.
Since we started doing this, I've started eating a lot more healthier, which is good. I need to, but.
That is lovely.
Tastes ideal. To be honest, another one, quick and easy.
Cheap as chips, it is really. You price it up. I know you have to buy a bit of, you'd have to buy sesame oil. I've used that. You can use normal oil. So once you've got your ingredients, I would think £1.50 tops a person. Easy, maybe £2 tops. And it's lovely, tasty, good food.
Very good. Right.
Are we done for today?
We have, yeah. Now, thanks for joining us once more, and goodbye for now.